All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our February Uncensored and In Charge. As always, it is a pleasure to be with you. I am Erin Childs, and I appreciate all of you who are tuning in. Today, we are going to talk about the power of communication in teams and how strong communication drives trust, performance, and results. Something that I'm sure all of you have always thought about, heard about, say that you do it, but I want to dive deep into it today. Recently, I've had a lot of clients and I talking about communication and issues within the organizations, and it really all breaks down to lack of communication. So I thought that this would be a really nice topic for this month, and we're going to dive in. I would like for each of you to think about the best team you've ever been a part of, okay? And what made it work. What was so amazing about the team? Okay. I've heard many things, but one thing that pops out the most consistently is communication, or my boss was listening. We were so organized. We had strong leadership. All of these things have been feedback that have been sprinkled in to what people believe have been a positive outcome because of their team coming together and making it happen. Now, I want you to think about one of the worst teams you've been a part of. What went wrong? I've heard all kinds of comments on this from clients expressing a lot of frustration. I've heard things like there's lack of clarity, poor leadership, misunderstandings, zero accountability, drama or tension, right? I'm sure all of you are hearing me list these things and understand what I'm saying. Almost every team's success or failure can be traced back to one thing if we really want to break this down, and that is communication. So here's why communication is so critical to teams, okay? And we're going to go through this, and I want you to really kind of lean into this because oftentimes when we talk about communication in our organizations, we will say or we believe we are better than we actually are. Okay. And that's not to be judgy and call you out, but I just want you to kind of lean into this a little bit differently with a wider eye open. So, why communication is critical to teams? Well, number one, communication builds trust, right? And trust is the foundation of any team, any relationship that you are building, that you are working as a part of, both, whether it's physically in it or from the peripheral, if you're adding to a team, communication is what builds the trust in the foundation. Okay. Now, as a highlighted piece in the 5 dysfunctions of a team by Patrick Leoncioni, he talks about the absence of trust and how it's number one first dysfunction. He talks about team without trust cannot have healthy conflict, commitment, or accountability. And so what does this mean? If you have strong communication with your team and or your team members, okay, this is what will exist. You're going to create psychological safety for your team. And what does psychological safety mean? What do I mean by this? This means that mentally they feel very comfortable where they are. They feel very safe when they talk or share things or have opinions, right? This psychological safety encourages honesty from your team. And what does that mean? Okay, well, if they disagree with you, if they have their own opinion that is different than maybe the masses, it allows for them to feel very comfortable to speak, to share the thoughts without feeling judged or questioned. What does this do? This reduces assumptions. And why is this important? Because oftentimes when we aren't communicating appropriately, people will often assume different things. And that can be positive or that can be negative. And at the end of the day, what it does is it creates a disconnect in the communication that you're trying to kind of have, right? So some might think one thing, some might think the others, but you all aren't sharing your thoughts to make it to a cohesive thought and assume something differently, if that makes sense. Okay. Having strong communication will also prevent resentment. So if somebody's supposed to be doing something you thought they were, they're not doing it, you're wondering why, but you haven't questioned or asked them the why on it, you become resentful for that and it prevents it. So communication, a giant important thing. Number 2, having good communication with the driving of the clarity as I see it is if communication isn't clear to your team or the message isn't clear to your team or who the message is coming from, it can blur the lines a little bit with roles that people are supposed to be doing, right? Expectations have the ability to shift during this time, and accountability for who's responsible for that specific job or role can disappear, right? So that's really important because I just basically told you that the vision of it becomes blurry. People are expecting maybe other people to do it, and those who are supposed to hold those accountable aren't. So the accountability disappears. So that's a huge deal of what clarity means to communication. Now, what people with really clear teams know, they know what success looks like. They know who owns what as far as the roles are concerned. They know that when things are due and what priorities matter most. Okay. So, super important that we all recognize being confused and not having clarity within your teams is really expensive and a waste of time for everybody. Having clarity is powerful and it actually creates really good results because everybody is so clear and focused on the job that needs to get done, on what needs to happen in order for the job to get done. Okay. And I don't want to digress here, but hopefully you're able to pull this into each one of your companies and roles and responsibilities that people have so that you can understand from the higher level of what I'm really trying to communicate to you. Okay. Communication impacts performance. So, according to research from Gallup, who I assume most of you have heard of, highly engaged teams outperform others in productivity, profitability, and retention. That seems obvious to me. Engagement with your team strongly correlates with consistent, clear communication from your leadership as well as from the team. Okay. Teams that talk well together, communicate, perform well. All right. 3 common communication breakdowns, as I was talking about before, is assumptions instead of clarification. So, for example, we're all in a room meeting, we're at a table, and you guys are discussing different events that might be going on to bring it back to catering. Okay. And somebody says, well, we thought you were handling that. How many times have we all been in a situation where somebody said, well, I thought you were handling that? And I say, oh, well, I assumed that you knew. Well, knew what? Assumptions are killing the alignment of your entire organization at this table right now. And as I'm saying this, I'm sure that all of you are realizing that you've been at a table having a meeting and the exact same sentences have been said. This is really, really important for people to kind of understand and see what we're trying to break down here. Number 2, huge common communication breakdown is avoiding difficult conversations. Now, I think in all of our professional lives, there have been difficult conversations that we all want to avoid. Okay. When the stakes are high and emotions are strong, we either have a tendency to attack the person or the situation or avoid it. And if I have to guess, most of you will probably actually avoid the confrontation. Okay. And this also could go for most levels of leadership, sometimes senior leadership, right? Now, people assume or think that because you're a leader, that you are, a fierce bull and you'll go after it and you'll address it. My hope is that most leaders do. But there are leaders that are afraid of that. And having difficult conversations can sometimes be challenging, right? So I want to talk and add that high performing teams lean into healthy conflict. They address it, they acknowledge mistakes, errors, and they kind of own them. Silence is not harmony, it's postponed conflict. So you can convince yourself that you're going to address it and waste time trying to come up with excuses for when you finally do. But trust me, your silence is speaking volumes to your leaders. And if you are a leader and you've got leaders above you, your silence is still speaking volumes to those leaders. It's important to learn how to address conflict because it gives you better communication. B, it gives you more confidence as a leader for somebody that knows how to swallow their pride and have a difficult conversation with somebody. And it doesn't have to be in a yelling format. Sometimes people will get confused and think, a difficult conversation or a disagreement has to be about yelling. It actually shouldn't at all be about yelling, to be honest with you. It should be about clear communication in your thoughts with the understanding and receptive antennas up to hear the disagreeing thoughts and the argument behind why this person, for example, is not performing where they should, or didn't hit sales targets that they should, or aren't pulling their weight on the team. That's an important part for everybody to realize. Direct conversations that are difficult are so much better. And if you don't know how to have them, learn, practice, because it's important that we as leaders learn how to have those really difficult conversations, not to avoid them, and especially not to allow our team members not to have them. Okay. Number 3, lack of feedback culture. This is great. I just had the last 2 weeks conversations regarding feedback within our businesses and how important feedback is. Okay. Without feedback, and I want you to envision large events, catering events, the event manager talks to the client gives their feedback to the event manager, says whether it's positive, good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, right? You get all that feedback. And then that event manager takes that feedback and moves on his or her way. And that's it. They don't share the feedback. So without feedback, I want you to understand that your team will plateau. Okay. Frustration will build within your organization, whether or not you realize it or not. And growth within each individual in your organization will stop. And as a whole, right? So let me lay this out for you. I was talking about that large event. We did a great event. Client gave me feedback. Client gave me feedback about how delicious the food was, how beautiful the presentation of everything was. However, they gave me the feedback that some of the wait staff wasn't as trained as they felt that they should have been. That people were asking what dishes were what, and some people didn't know everything. But me, as the event manager, I take that information in and I haven't shared it with the team. I haven't shared it with the operations team so that we can all get together and work through the feedback that was received and really dive in so that we can correct it for the next event. Okay. Healthy teams normalize feedback. It should become part of your daily fabric in every single thing that you do, good and bad feedback. This is exactly how you learn. This is how your team learns. This is how you become stronger, bigger, better. This is how you have difficult conversations. Your teams will grow to want to hear how things went if you create normalizing feedback within your culture. Okay. This is especially important when they are operating at their very best or they had a really big, challenging week of catering sales and events and they freaking crushed it. And you get to go back and share all of the highlights, all of the positives, and some of the hurdles. And all of this becomes normal because there are always good and bad things that happen at these events. That's okay. That's normal. What this feedback culture creates for them and this good communication is that they are proud of the work that they have done. They are proud of what they have executed. So we want to make sure that they hear it, that we share it with them. And that's extremely valuable and extremely important. Okay, so great team communication looks like clarity over cleverness. And what do I mean? So we are setting clear expectations of what we expect. Okay. There are written follow ups, there's defined ownership of each person's role. Okay. I'll give you an example in case you want one. Instead of let's try to get that done soon. For example, we're working on a special events menu for the spring. Okay. And we say it's February. We say, let's get that done soon. Okay. I would like for you to shift that communication to Erin will complete the proposal by this Friday at 3 p.m. Okay. Anybody that knows me well enough knows that I will absolutely always press you for a date for completion of doing some project that you're working on. I find it tremendously valuable, and I know that most people do. It's okay if you don't hit the date. I say this to my clients all the time. We'll set dates and expectations for certain things. The date will be approaching. They might not be ready to execute, or it might not be done. And then we say, okay, then we have to move the date a little bit. But you have more pressure on you to get it done in a certain amount of time than just saying, oh yeah, no, we'll do that. We'll make sure that we hit that. But there's no date to hit that. So how are you going to actually make sure that you're holding yourself or your team accountable? So it's extremely important that you set dates. Let's try to get this done by Friday at 3 p.m., April 1st. I don't even know if that's a Friday, but whatever. You get my point. You will always have higher probability when you're hitting a date and you're picking a date. Okay? Now, we're going to go back to psychological safety because I think that teams that share and have this open communication forum, okay? And I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the Project Aristotle, but if you Google it, it'll share the highest performing teams share one trait, and that is the psychological safety that they feel together. Okay? They won't fear embarrassment when they're talking about something. They won't fear that they're going to get in trouble. They feel safe. They feel heard. Okay. People who don't feel safe and heard don't speak, don't share their problems. And as a result, problems will continue to grow. Okay. So it's extremely important that when you create this culture of communication with your teams, that you are actively listening to what they are saying to you. Communication isn't always talking, but it's actually understanding. Let me say that again. Communication isn't always talking, it's actually understanding what they're talking about. Okay? It's listening. Very important. Strong listeners, um, I'm going to say strong leaders who are good listeners don't interrupt. They ask clarifying questions. They reflect back on what they heard or what you're sharing with them. And they listen so that they can understand what you're saying, what you're describing, what you're feeling. And they won't necessarily always respond right away. Okay? As a leader, if you're listening to your team share these things, it's always nice to say, okay, so what I'm hearing is this. Is that correct? And repeat it back to them. Because what you're taking in as the leader or as the person listening, you want to make sure that you're taking in the right information that you are hearing and what your team member is saying to you. Okay? Now, having consistent communication is how this is going to become part of your culture of communication. So, one team meeting a month to talk about stuff is not communication. That is what most people would probably call maintenance. Okay. Strong teams communicate weekly, very transparently, predictability. They have follow through. Every week you have a meeting to discuss the following. If it's something that's super important that's popped up, well, then that's totally great because then what you can do is you can just pop into that day and say, hey, Erin, I was hoping, I know that we were talking about this last Friday, Monday for this week. I just noticed XYZ. I think that we should kind of plan accordingly. That's the predictability in that communication. Do you see? That you understand where things were going, and all of a sudden, here you are. You're predicting what's going to happen so that that meeting at the end of the month, that's extremely valuable. Excuse me. The meeting at the end of the week is extremely valuable. And you can touch back on it too at the end of the month when you do your big recap. Okay. Practical tools for better team communication. Now, start and plan meetings with alignment. And this is important so it's not a waste of your time or anyone else's time. Most people believe that meetings are a waste of time. So, what's our goal is one of the first things you always want to have when you're planning or starting a meeting, right? I always say to clients, have an agenda. You should actually always have an agenda so that you know what's the goal of our meeting? What are we going to discuss? Okay. What does the success look like? Who owns it? Then you're really clear in each person's job and responsibilities of what they're supposed to cover. Okay. In all of these things that you're implementing on communication, you should make sure that you create a no assumption culture. Okay? You should create norms like, can you clarify for me? What does that mean specifically? When do you want this by? When should we complete this by? And all of these things are so important because most of us will have meetings, discuss all of these things, these goals, these grand plans that we're supposed to execute on, but there's no real true clarity on it. People haven't been specific enough as to who's doing what. But if we have this team together at a table and we're very clear on what the expectations are, specifically what each person's role is, and when it needs to be completed by, guess what? We're not assuming it. We all know our roles and what we have to do and what we have to execute on. Normalizing clarification will allow for you to be so amazed on how much better your teams will perform, and they will all do better because of it. Now, some of you have heard of a 24-hour role rule if there's tension in your organization. Okay. Some of you know that you should address it within 24 hours. I say 12 to 24 because sometimes people need to breathe a little bit. Okay. Having difficult conversations and not letting too much time pass is extremely important for you as a leader and your team because while the situation is going on, right? If you can take a step back, breathe a little bit, write down your thoughts and your frustrations, extremely valuable, and address it sooner rather than later, then you can work through it and move on. And it doesn't cause too much disruption to the team itself or the organization or the project that you guys are working on, if that makes sense. Okay. Having conflict within your team, I know is difficult. I have personally had it. I think sometime last year I had talked about communication in teams and conflict in teams and conflict resolution. Okay. I've learned from it. It's one of the reasons why I feel like I'm very comfortable in having difficult conversations today with people because I am very understanding in the active listening of their frustration. Most of this breaks down to communication that we all aren't having, right? People get frustrated or tension builds because they had feelings that they didn't share or they were frustrated because of something that had happened. So having these difficult conversations and addressing them in a swift manner within 24 hours is extremely valuable for you and for you to implement with your team. Okay. And if you need it to be the moderator in between it, then you do that and make sure somebody is able to do that so that people feel comfortable. Okay. Now, in your meetings, okay, um, as you guys are addressing roles and what each member is responsible for and timelines and everything like that, I think it's really important that everybody close every meeting with a question of the following. Ready? Is anything unclear? Seems like the simplest thing. Somebody had asked me this a few weeks ago. Is anything unclear to what I'm saying? And you'd be surprised how powerful that one question can be. And if nobody speaks up, that's fine. They might not feel comfortable. So say, if everything seems clear, awesome. But if anything is unclear and you can't think of it right now, please reach out to me directly or come to me directly and we can have a discussion. I think that it's extremely important that people know outside of this that they can come to you and talk. And then the next meeting, the following week, you can say, last week, Erin had come to me and wasn't clear on XYZ. Or if it's something that's more time sensitive, you could send an email saying, hey, Erin had come to me. She wasn't clear on this. And I just want to send this out to everybody to make sure everybody is on the same page. It's another saying that you've probably heard. I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. That's extremely valuable. Now, communication is not a soft skill. It's a leadership skill. It's a culture skill. It's a performance multiplier. Strong communication builds trust, prevents conflict, drives results, and protects your culture. I think communication is glorious. I've seen it in its highest form. I've seen teams thrive. I've seen leaders thrive because they see that their team is communicating appropriately. A final thought for you guys before we go into questions. Teams don't fail because lack of talent most of the time. They fail because of lack of clarity and courage that hasn't been set. They fail because no one stops to teach communication if they don't already know it. They struggle because they don't know what good communication looks like. And that's very common. I have plenty of clients that I have worked with that think their communication is really good. And by the end of our work together, they start to realize that they were missing important pieces within their communication. And if they're missing it as the leaders, chances are their team is probably missing a few of those pieces as well. And coming together and recognizing that and teaching those little missing parts are huge. I challenge all of you to write down one communication habit that your team or you need to improve upon. And I challenge you to share one that you can implement this week or this upcoming week. I think that all of these things are really, really valuable, and little tiny miscommunications have a tendency to build upon each other. So make an effort to make it a habit to communicate better. Make it a habit to create a safe environment for your team and for anybody that wants to chat with you and share thoughts and feedback with you, because you will get more out of it. You as an individual will become a better, stronger leader for it. And I am now going to open it up for a few questions right now, and we'll go there. Okay, you say almost every team success or failure can be traced back to communication. In my experience, what is the earliest warning signs that communication is breaking down on a team? Usually it's silence, believe it or not. Um, Usually it's when somebody isn't sharing something. So remember that part that I was just talking about before, and I about dealing with difficult conversations, okay? When emotions are strong and stuff like that. If you if something hasn't gone right, okay, and you are frustrated, oftentimes people might shut down, and not have the conversation because they're afraid of a conflict. You might be a not an approachable leader. Something to be very open about and self-aware about. So usually I would say early warning signs are silence from the team and chitter chatter because they're frustrated, but they're not communicating that to you. Next question. Oh, nope, sorry. Go back there on questions. Sorry. Um, okay. You reference the 5 dysfunctions of a team and the absence of trust as the first dysfunction. What are practical behaviors leaders can adopt immediately to begin rebuilding trust when it's been damaged? Uh, this is Trust is so hard to build back. I just had a call yesterday with a client, and it was about trust. And it was about building somebody's trust back. And they said, I need you to start moving forward and believing what I'm going to work on for the future. Okay. And why was this very valuable to them? This was valuable to them because what they were essentially saying to their team member was that they can't change what's happened in the past. They can only change and try for the future. And I think that if you have to rebuild trust, um, one of the most honest ways to begin doing it is acknowledge the fact that you had a mistake or you were wrong or um, whatever the problem is, and start day by day building a better building block off of it, and tell the team, I made a mistake, or I am sorry. I am going to earn your trust back. And I believe trust can be earned back through actions and follow up and follow throughs and clear expectations and keeping your word on what you say you're going to do. And I believe over time that you can regain your team's trust, but you have to put in the effort and you have to put your money where your mouth is on it and truly show up and do as you're going to say. Um, okay, you talk about psychological safety as a key ingredient in high performing teams. How can leaders create psychological safety without lowering performance standards? Well, nobody should be lowering performance standards as far as I'm concerned. They should be lifting them up. Psychological safety is about setting the groundwork for honest conversations and open conversations amongst everybody. And you, as the leader, being able to control the tone and make sure that it's a very positive, um, safe space for everybody. And you can even start that discussion by saying, I want everyone to feel very comfortable and safe when we're talking about this. What we're about to discuss in this room is to stay in this room, and I want to make that clear, right? So you're setting open communication about what your expectation and standard is regarding the difficult conversation that you are about to have or people are about to share, right? Feeling safe in the space that you're working with and the team members that you're working with is extremely important. And it takes a long time to build it. It is not something that is built overnight, but slowly, if you build little piece by little piece, I promise you that you will build an extremely strong, confident, psychologically secure team that feels heard, that feels comfortable when something isn't going right and it's not going their way, that they can share with you. So I hope that answers that. Okay, when communication is unclear, roles blur, and accountability disappears, what is one simple system you recommend to ensure ownership is always clearly defined? Okay, well, I would first look at at the leader and say, who was responsible for what? Did the leader clearly communicate those tasks to the respective party that was supposed to be handling it? And did we set the expectation and time of when it was supposed to be delivered? Okay. Who owns what? And if they didn't do it, that the leader goes to them. I would even say one on one. I find there's value, obviously, to that. And I would say, hey, Erin, I just wanted to check in. You were supposed to do this and you haven't. Is everything okay? Right? Lead with empathy there because we never understand really what's going on in somebody's world. And they could be completely overwhelmed and completely paralyzed by something going on in their world that feels like the biggest deal. And sometimes addressing something in an empathetic way, let's jump to thought leadership real quick there. It can help your team member feel comfortable and relax a little bit and open that communication and let you know what's going on. Again, adding a little bit of building block in the trust and the security of your team. You emphasize, it says, I emphasize clarity over cleverness. Why do you think leaders sometimes default to vague language instead of direct expectations? Honestly, because they don't know themselves and or they don't want to address it themselves. So vague language is, oh yeah, we'll get it done. And it goes into like the stack of stuff right here on the desk because they don't know how to address it. They don't know how to deal with it necessarily. And so they've got to figure out who can deal with it. Okay? So, direct expectations is something I would sit and ask my team, and I say this to clients all the time. If there's something as a leader you don't like because because it's just not you don't like it. You don't want to do it. You feel like you're not good at it. It's okay. But ask your team. There might be somebody on your team that enjoys handling that. And they might want to step up and do that. And that takes this giant thing off of your plate. Okay. So being clear in something that you don't want to do is okay. You can say it like, this isn't a strength of mine. Does anybody else enjoy something like this? Or could anybody else assist me in doing this? Sometimes two or three people coming together to do something that feels like such a bear on our back is far more powerful and clever. So I hope that answers that question. Um, Okay, it says you mentioned that silence is not harmony, it's postponed conflict. How can leaders coach team members who tend to avoid difficult conversations? Um, you have to allow for people to feel comfortable that having difficult conversations is okay. And you can even say, I know having difficult conversations is hard. I struggled with it at one point myself. But having difficult conversations allows for us to share our true feelings and get to the bottom or the root cause of what is challenging us or what is putting up the roadblock. Okay. So it's extremely important from a communication standpoint in a culture that you, as the leader, are setting the tone, the baseline for what is to be considered a norm and calling out the fact that people might feel stuck in having a difficult conversation and they don't want to talk about it, and being the first one to speak is is a powerful and very positive role model move. And um, that would be my advice. And it doesn't happen overnight. I'll add that. It doesn't happen overnight. So I think it's extremely important that you recognize that you have to build that trust and that you have to create that communication as part of the culture. Okay. In my experience, what's the biggest mistake leaders make when trying to create a feedback culture? They don't let others be heard. They share their feedback more than they listen. And I would say, as actually, well, I say that, and then here's another thing that I was just talking about the other day. If you have people leaving your organization in any way, growth, moving on to a better opportunity, or changing career paths, whatever it is, always do an exit interview. And the reason why is because you are going to capture feedback from somebody that has worked within your organization and is now departing. And why do I find that extremely valuable? Because you might get an unfiltered version of something that you don't realize. Listen deeply, leaders. Listen to your team, take in their feedback that they're giving you, and openly communicate it, because there is tremendous value in that. And that is not something that many people do. Many people don't do exit interviews when people leave their company, for good or for bad. But I think there is a powerful amount of information with somebody that's leaving your organization that you can take and you can spread to the team, and you can make a better, more positive impact for the next person coming in if it was something within your culture that caused them to leave. Um, I am going to take one last question. It says, you introduced the 24-hour rule for addressing tension. How do you suggest someone approach that conversation if emotions are still high? You have to have somebody um, having the conversation with the people. And sometimes it might take a little bit longer. Maybe you address a couple of things and then you pause and you move on, and you marinate on those thoughts and feelings. But I think that it's extremely important that you make sure that you are addressing the conflict at least a little bit and get the ball rolling in the beginning, so that nobody forgets why we're frustrated. But sometimes tensions last way longer than 24 hours, even after difficult conversations have started. And that's okay. They don't necessarily need to be fixed in a day, but the communication needs to be there and the effort needs to be put forth so that everybody feels heard, acknowledged. They can share their frustrations and feelings and work through it. So that is it for me today. And if there are any ideas and feelings that you guys have for the future, I always say feel free to DM me on LinkedIn or Cater Linked. And thank you for tuning in today. I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Take care.